Hello and welcome to the week that really was with John McGurk and Sarah Ryan for the 1st of November 2024. We are 4 days away from an American presidential election. We are maybe 6 days away from an Irish general election being called. And I am joined, as I always am, by Phoenix Magazine cover girl, Sarah Ryan. How are you?
I'm fine.
She's thrilled. You're thrilled. You were called a young blood.
I'm basking in the glory of being called young. You know, I didn't think...
Yes.
You've been a young blood a few times yourself.
No, just the once. I've also been a pillar of society twice, so they do like profiling me. I must be good for both of us. We must sell magazines, Sarah, I think, is the only explanation.
You're always a pillar of society to me, John.
Thank you, Sarah.
Phoenix
you'll always be my young blood.
The Phoenix have done a piece. I don't know. Maybe they need a new hate figure for the right or something on me. But what can I say? What can I say, John? I mean, it's a week away from a general election being called. I appreciate that. Surely there are, aspiring general election candidates who could do with the publicity. But whatever.
Yeah. Well, I'm in Malta. That hence the curtain behind me. I'm in a hotel room in lovely Valletta, which I highly recommend. If you haven't been, you should come here. Although it was quite disconcerting this morning, Sarah. I was eating my breakfast and I was looking out over the harbour and I saw these 3 warships sailing out. And I thought to myself, must be like a UK Royal Navy flotilla or something. But actually, turns out it was 3 ships of the Maltese Navy. So I went and looked it up, and it turns out Malta, which is about the size of half the size of Laos, has a navy almost twice the size of the Irish Republic's. So that got me to thinking, because we've got a general election coming up, and one of the things that won't be discussed in the general election is, of course, defence, which is the main responsibility of the government. But that won't be an issue in the election. I'm not entirely sure what the issues in the election will be, or when it'll even be called. He hasn't made any progress on that front at all. I mean, I've been away. I kind of fully expected the election to be called by now, but I think it looks like it's going to be next Thursday. Looking at the Dáil agenda when he finally pulls the trigger.
I think that the flip-flopping on the general election has become kind of tiresome to the majority of people.
Very tiresome.
I don't know what... I'm still at a loss as to what the sort of psychology was behind this. Like, slowly saying over and over again, saying it won't be, then slowly conceding that it will be before Christmas. And now, just call it. I don't get it. I think people find it kind of silly.
It's ridiculous. It's so stupid. It's the ultimate Leinster House insider game. And people enjoying being in the know and speculating and all that bullshit. He could have just said 2 weeks ago, look, the election's going to be on November 29th, and I'll go Ross and Uachtaráin on the 6th of November to get the campaign underway.
And this thing of like speculation about the general election is distracting from the work of the government. No, what you've done is distract from the work of the government by messing around about it. Just call it.
Yeah.
No,
you couldn't be more right about that.
So, yeah, but we are a week away. Well, you would imagine by the time you return home, we will have a date of the 29th of November.
No, I don't think we'll have a date until after the Americans go to vote first, which they will on Tuesday. We'll talk about that in a moment. Mm-hmm. But first of all, I mean, I was just struck this week by 2 things in the culture I wanted to talk about, because I've been away and I haven't been reading hard news as much. I've kind of been following more cultural news, and I see the usual round of applause from the great and the good for Cillian Murphy's new movie, which is called Small Things Like These, which is set in 1985 in a mother and baby home somewhere in the south of the country. I think it's Wexford. And basically it's the usual horror tale of like how awful the nuns were, how awful Catholic Ireland was in 1985. How far we've come, etc. And then on the same week, I'm seeing Tusla announcing via LMFM, it wasn't really widely picked up, that their records in the Kyron Durnan case, which is obviously a horrific case of a child who just appears to have fallen through the cracks altogether, mysteriously got deleted in a hack a couple of years ago, and they won't be able to restore them. And I'm watching a court case in Northern Ireland where a 26-year-old man called Alexander McCartney turns out to have been the world's most egregious predator of young children. I'm looking at another case over in Mayo where a HSE manager is now awaiting sentence on some of the most horrific child pornography, child abuse charges you can possibly imagine. And here is the entirety of Irish society, or at least the cultural great and the good, looking back at 1985 and saying, wasn't it awful? Like, it makes me sick. Does it not make you a little bit sick?
Yeah, and just to add to the list, I mean, we're also in the process of, chemically castrating children in Ireland, and, say nothing for the children who are awaiting scoliosis treatments, who are, that's kind of going off the agenda, but it's still there. Like, I think that, you know, there was a book, The Heart's Invisible Furies or something, and I started reading it in the summer when I was in Greece, and then I just stopped because, like, I just feel like it's become porn, like, almost, to kind of, we're addicted to the horror of the past. And that's not to diminish that bad things happened in Ireland for years, but it's just that, like, if you ever want something that will get the crowd going, it's how terrible things were before. And yet there's a lack of focus on things that will be the equivalent of that. Like I've said before, I'm absolutely 100% confident that in the future, the Late Late Show, or whatever, the equivalent is by then, but maybe not, maybe it'll be only 10 years and it will be the Late Late Show, that there'll be a line of children post-op or post-transition transgender children who are suing the state, who are looking for compensation because they were allowed as children to change their gender without proper consultation with the right professionals, etc., etc., etc. Like, we're in that right now. That's what will be in the future. But we're ignoring that today to self-flagellate all the time about things that happened a long time ago. If I was to say to you, and if you were to look at it as the kind of use the example of one person, if something bad had happened to you in the 80s or a long time ago, like, I wouldn't encourage you to think and talk about that bad thing all of the time. It's not to negate that it happened to you. It doesn't mean that, it's not a real thing and that you're not a victim and that it's awful and whatever. But you should, talk about it, receive the appropriate help, and then I would be encouraging you as your friend to live your life today, to not make that what your whole future is about, and to try in so far as is possible to move on with your life and to be happy. And if you take that example of one person and do what we do, we're obsessed and addicted to talking about bad things that happened in the past. Again, that's not to diminish anything or say that there shouldn't be, absolute light shone on things that happened, but we've been doing that. We're both 40. That's been happening for years and years and years, and we're obsessed with it. And yet we ignore big problems, big things that are happening today. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, I go one further than that, because I think I'm listening to you and I'm agreeing with everything you're saying, but one thing, which is that you're doing something, and I do this too, which is you say, yeah, we accept bad things happened in the past. It was a bad time. I'm sorry, but why do I go so high pitched there? I'm not that. I kind of
shrill.
like, I'm sorry, shrill. I just think it's bullshit. I was watching the trailer for the movie, and you know what struck me about it was obviously Cillian Murphy, very fine actor. It looks dark, and that's a conscious choice. It's shot in this kind of very low tone, almost not black and white, but almost grey. The weather they're using pathetic fallacy, where kind of like, it's grey and miserable, and everything looks, even the clothes look kind of uncomfortable that people are wearing, and the message from even the cinematography of the movie is, this is a horrible place, a kind of a walking purgatory. That's what Ireland was in the 1980s. And I'm sorry, but bullshit. I know, I was there. I was a child. I grew up in it. I grew up in Ireland in the 1980s and the early 1990s. This idea that it was some kind of horrible, awful country is bullshit, and it has to be challenged. I mean, Laura Perrins, who is wonderful and has been standing in for me this week in writing articles for Gript, wrote a piece the other day that I wish I'd had the courage to say a long time ago, which was, we went to good schools, we got good educations. We were, as she says, she was in an all-girls school where, far from being kept down, they were challenged, and they were told they could go and become nurses and doctors and lawyers and advocates, and lo and behold, they all went and did these things. There's an array of, Irish women between the ages of sort of 40 and 60 who have had wonderful careers because they were educated in that society and given a good start in life, and yet they're the same people. I'm not pinning it on 46-year-old women, but that generation, which actually was served well by the country, are the very people turning around to shit on it from a height for performative reasons. It drives me bananas. I mean, I grew up in that society. it was a pretty good place to grow up. Were there some awful things that happened? Of course there were some awful things that happened. But look, we live in 2024, Sarah. It's a pretty good society. Look what happened to poor Kyron Durnan, or what is believed to have happened to poor Kyron Durnan. Look what happened to that poor girl who took her own life at the hands of a 26-year-old monster who was using the internet, a modern gift, to torture children. Look at the homeless children we have in our society. I mean, we don't make movies in the modern day where everything is grey and the clothes are scratchy and everything's miserable. It is misery porn, and it has a political purpose, not an artistic purpose. And I think that drives me batty. But of course,
Yeah, no,
I don't know. Some people will disagree with me, I know, but I really think that needs to be said. And I'm really grateful Laura Perrin said it during the week.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I think that ultimately, as a culture, we have a kind of a habit of leaning in completely to things and not being able to kind of have a bit of perspective. I'm the same. I grew up in the 80s. I have friends or people who are close to me who are in their 60s who were nurses who would say that hospitals never ran better than when they were run by nuns, and that there were like a, whatever, run like a tight ship, I was going to say. Like, not everything was terrible. We have a very good education system or whatever. And there are lots of priests and nuns who did amazing work in communities and did really good things. And another thing is that, sexual abuse and things that happened to children in the 80s wasn't exclusively as the hands of the church. One of the unfortunate things that people don't talk about as much is that inter-family sexual abuse was also quite common in Ireland in those days. And, that's a reality too. But at the same time, lots of people grew up relatively happy, got a good education, as you say, went to hospitals and didn't lie on the ground for 18 hours before they perished. Like, some things worked well and some things were okay, and were addicted. And that book, I was going to say, The Heart's Invisible Furies, I was on my holidays and I'm a big reader, and I usually read like 8 to 10 books per holiday. And this was about the 4th book. And I'd read a couple of really good books. And then I got into this, and it's like, and I know that it's absolutely adored, this book, and people will come for me because they think it's amazing or whatever. But in the first couple of pages, a girl is a teenager in some town in Ireland, finds out that you don't really know how she's pregnant, but she's pregnant. The priest calls her up to the front of the church at Sunday Mass, kicks her in the arse down out of the church in front of everyone, kicks her like down the thing, whatever. Then she's abandoned by her family. They tell her to pack her bags and get out. So she goes to Dublin. On the bus to Dublin, she meets a guy. Long story short, she moves in with him and his friend, who are obviously gay. One of their dads shows up, beats him to death for being gay. Like, it's like about this. Then there's an allusion or a story in it about another pregnancy where the father is drowning the babies as they're born because he's the sexual. And it was just so much abuse and so much misery. And I was in Greece and I was just like, no, I'm sorry to people who love that book, but like, I'm not naive, and I'm not unaware that awful things happen in Ireland. But as you say, we're addicted to it sometimes, and everything that's to do with that is a winner because it's showing. Is there a person over the age of 20 in Ireland right now who doesn't know that terrible things happened in Ireland before? Because if there is, it's impossible. So I'm like, to go back to the example I was using, that if you're a post-trauma friend, I'm not telling you to read books about it and talk about it and think about it every day of your life and go on the radio and talk about it. I'm telling you that, like, maybe the path to happiness, John, would be to, process what happened, do the work, and then move on.
Yeah, and if you want to address injustice, you can't address injustice for the dead.
No.
You have to address injustice for the people who are alive today. And in this society, we have a lot of injustice going on, and a lot of rank incompetence. I mean, I'm sorry, but like this whole business with Tusla losing, or apparently losing, the records for Kyron Durnan. I mean, if that was, and I said it on the podcast last week about in relation to another matter, if the church were responsible for this, it'd be the only thing we're talking about. The only thing we'd be talking about, the kind of recklessness and the lack of attention to detail, and the uncaring, and treating children as kind of like products, and it's all still there. the uncaring, cold, bureaucratic system that treats people like lines in an Excel spreadsheet or somehow responsible for their own misery or their own condition. It's still all there. It's just run by the state now. And like, it is baffling to me. Last week we discussed the case of the 14-year-old girl revealed in March, who to have ended up having gone from Tusla to living in a brothel. You know, had that happened under the aegis of, had that happened in the 1980s, Cillian Murphy would be making movies about it today. As it is, he's making a movie set in the 1980s when the last mother and baby home in Wexford closed in 1967. So it's not even accurate. And the books you were talking about there about priests kicking women down the church in front of the congregation, that didn't happen. Well, we can invent that sort of stuff. People who it was mothers and fathers who put their daughters into mother and baby homes. It wasn't the church. Church didn't have capture squads going to people's homes and dragging people away. It was parents who did it voluntarily, who maybe now want to find a reason to blame somebody else for having made them do it. Maybe there was some social pressure. I don't know. But pretending that we're somehow better now is just hilariously wrong-headed.
I'm sure there are people who think I'm obsessed with this, and I suppose I kind of am. But the modern social pressure is to make your child trans, is to allow your child to be trans, because you don't have the balls to stand up to your mates and say, I think this is bullshit and I'm not allowing my children to take puberty blockers when they're 10 or 11 years of age. That's the modern social pressure. That's the equivalent, that you don't have the courage to stand up to society and say, something wrong with this, and I'm not doing that to my own kid. And I'm not going to be threatened or thrown out of society or whatever. You know, the local mommy groups can shun me all they like, but I'm not doing that to my kid. That's the modern equivalent. It's the same kind of thing. It's just dressed up in a different outfit. It's abandoning your kid because you don't have the balls to stand up to other people. Same dog, different dress, you know? And later, again, it will be like, this is like, to me, this is the issue of our time. This will be talked about forever, that this was allowed to happen, that this happened to children, that this, you know, the parents allowed this, and parents will never, ever, ever, the parents who did it will never be able to admit it, because admitting it is too what they've done is too horrifying. This is the thing that people will talk about in the future, and everyone just sits around. Ooh, scary.
Well, I think it's really interesting, and here I'm going to do one of my world famous smooth segues. But I think it's really interesting that Donald Trump is closing so heavily on that very issue that you're discussing. I don't know to what extent our listeners and our viewers are watching what's being played on the battleground states on TV in the US by both campaigns. But Donald Trump's closing campaign ad that he's spent multiple tens of millions of dollars on basically is, it ends with the line, Kamala Harris is for they and them, Donald Trump is for you. And it goes through basically all her stuff about pronouns and transgenders and all that sort of stuff. And the Trump campaign clearly thinks and clearly has polling data that suggests this issue is dynamite for a lot of people. I think that's really interesting, because obviously, as bad as things are in Ireland, and they're not great because we always want to be the most liberal boys in Europe and indeed the world, but it's nothing like where it has been for a decade or more in the US. And in the US, those children that you're talking about, the detransitioners, the children who are saying my life was ruined by this, the first wave of them are now coming through the system. And obviously at the same time, you have a very loud progressive movement that's trying to make everyone wear pronoun badges and put they, them at the bottom of their emails and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's fascinating that Trump is going, or at least his campaign and the people making his ads are going so heavy on that message as we approach Tuesday. They obviously think they're onto a winner there.
Yeah, and I agree with them. Like, it's a massive issue, and you're right that it's coming of age maybe a little bit earlier, or maybe a little bit earlier than Ireland in America. But when Tavistock Clinic released a lot of the information, that I believe the data showed that the youngest child that went into Tavistock Clinic was Irish and 4 years of age. I have a 5-year-old here. He's nearly 6. Let me tell you about some of the decisions he's made about his life in the last week. Do you know what I mean? Absolutely absurd. And we go along with it. So that'll be the issue of our time. And you know what it'll be, John? It'll be the same shit. It'll be people sitting around going, "Oh no, I didn't have any part in that. I knew that was wrong, But oh no, we knew. No, you didn't. You didn't say anything. You said nothing."
Yep.
And the amount of politicians that you and I know, how many politicians do you speak to off the record? And I'm the same. Who you say, "But that's a load of shite. Why are you going along with that?" And they say, "Ah." Have you ever met a politician that you spoke to off the record? I've met one, and I still didn't even believe him. Have you ever met a politician that you spoke to off the record, that you talked to about the transgender and children and that whole issue, who didn't agree with you?
No, I've only met one who didn't agree with me, and that person was a social democrat, and I won't name them because I don't think that would be fair because it was private conversation. But yeah, a social democrat.
No, definitely.
But like, yeah, only one who's ever like really tried to push back in any kind of articulate way about sort of gender being a spectrum and sex being binary and there being a difference between the two and blah 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 blah. I mean, I didn't buy it naturally, but that person's the only person in politics. Now I have to say, lest the viewers think I'm obsessed, I don't go up to a load of TVs and kind of go, "So what do you think of the old transgenders?" But when it does come up in conversation surprisingly regularly, maybe in the context of things like sex education or that sort of stuff, or of course the hate speech bill or the hate crime laws became known. And yeah, all of them think it's nonsense. All of them think it's nonsense. And look, we just passed the hate crime law last week, and which introduced into law a definition of gender, which includes genders other than male or female of undefined number. I mean, nonsense. I mean, they should be kicked out of office for that alone, to be honest with you, because you're not serious about running a country if you're spending your time passing laws adding genders to the statute books. Like that's not what anyone sent you there to do. At the last election, you did not, as a Fine Gael candidate or a Fianna Fáil candidate, or indeed a Green Party candidate, go to very many doors in the country, knock on the door, have the voter open, and kind of go, "Well, my top issue now is adding genders to the statute book. There's no representation of cinnamon gender. Yeah. Why is there no representation of cinnamon gender? Will you fix that for me?" That didn't happen. So why is it on the statute books? It's on the statute books because you wasters, you absolute wasters, don't have an original idea of your own. So the lads from Belong To and Tenny come in and sit you down and kind of go, "Well, this is what we like now. This is what keep our movement happy." And you're like, "Oh, grand, so." That's how policy is made in Ireland. So yeah. For that alone, they should all be tossed out of office. Opposition and government alike, frankly. But I think then we might have difficulties. Some of them will get back in. That's just the nature of elections, isn't it? But
well, I mean, I do ask politicians about it quite often because I am sort of, a bit obsessed with it in the sense that, and due respect to you, I think it's an issue that seems to affect women, or will and does affect women more. Last week we had a case in the Irish courts of Barbie Kardashian, who was alleged to have. Well, I won't even get into the case, actually, was in a women's prison and is a biological male. So that's something that affects women. Women who go to prison in Ireland, for whatever reason it might be, deserve that the state will provide them with the limited security that they won't be raped by another inmate. Women who are girls who, Irish girls who want to become professional athletes, be it in swimming or boxing, deserve a reasonable expectation that they won't be punched in the face by a biological man, et cetera, et cetera. I deserve, if I bring my daughter swimming next week, the expectation in the changing room that there's not men there. You know what I mean? Et cetera, et cetera. So it is an issue that disproportionately affects women. And I am obsessed with it. And I think that it's an example where politicians, and male politicians or women politicians, are willing to throw a few women to the wolves for the sake of not having to stand up to it, or for the sake of their own ideological agenda. And I'm not having it.
Yeah. Preach and keep preaching on it, because I think it's one of those ones where a lot of people just aren't paying enough attention even yet, and they will. I mean, the case you reference in Limerick, and obviously viewers will know we have legal responsibilities and legal constraints about what we can say about matters pertaining to the law on this, but Barbie Kardashian was acquitted. The jury heard evidence from Barbie Kardashian that he did indeed threaten to rape some other women, the old-fashioned kind of women that he's in prison with electric prods and broom handles and all that sort of stuff in such a way that they might no longer have children. He said he wished to do this to punish one of them in particular for her alleged crimes, of which she has not been convicted. And the jury in Limerick listened to all this evidence, in which Barbie Kardashian said, yes, I made these threats, and then acquitted him of making those threats. So, to my mind, that is just a reminder that the jury system, you're the barrister, so maybe you can comment on this, maybe you don't want to, but it's a reminder that the jury system can produce unexpected results and not always the results one might expect them to produce. But beyond that, I don't think we can say much more, can we?
No, I don't think so. And also, say nothing. Like it's not about the. It's not about the.
No,
case.
It's not about
it's
the
about
individual
the fact
case.
that he's there. He's there in the first place. It shouldn't even exist. There shouldn't be a case. We shouldn't be having a conversation about whether this happened or not, because he should be in a male prison, because he is a man. And if I go to prison because I, whatever, for murder or whatever I do, there shouldn't be a man there. It's just absurd. And women are and will suffer as a result, because nobody has the courage to say this is madness. And it's not about, and what they do is they flip it around and they act like people like me are being cruel and, want to be cruel. I don't want to be cruel to anybody. People can do whatever they want. But a biological man should not be in a prison with women. End of.
Well, there's an old statistic from California about 10 years ago when they started doing this sort of stuff about transgender prison accommodation. And I think there were something like, I don't remember what the exact number was, but let's say it was 500 people in California who had requested to be reassigned from a prison of their original gender or original sex to a prison of their new sex. And all 500 of those people were males, born males, who had asked to be reassigned to a female prison because they now identified as women. But of course, we're told that transgenders are roughly 50-50 in the population, that there are just as many women like you out there, Sarah, who decide that you've actually been a man all your life and wish to change. So do you know how many people were born as female and wish to reassign themselves into a male prison? None. Not one single person. Which I kind of think speaks entirely to what's going on here. Obviously, there are a couple of female to male transgender prisoners in California, but they were all perfectly content staying in their existing accommodations. Fascinating,
weird.
Isn't it?
Yeah, weird. So weird.
Yeah. Anyway, who's going to win on Tuesday? Before Sarah answers that question, we may have, and there's no promises here, we're working on getting a guest, we may have a special episode of this podcast on Tuesday with somebody who knows a lot more about this than we do to walk us through what you should be looking at on Tuesday night to figure out who's winning.
A very exciting guest. Yes. Yes. I think all the momentum is behind Donald. I just don't see Kamala pulling it off. I think her campaign has been appalling. I don't think she's a good candidate. I think that she got an initial bump because the media did absolutely everything they possibly could to make her seem like the messiah. But I think that she lacks depth as a candidate. I think the fact that she has been the vice president for over 3 years is very damaging to her, if you know what I mean. Because, how can you say, well, it's very difficult to lead or to run a campaign on that basis. And I also think that the issues that seem to time and time again matter to the most people in America, like cost of living, he's better on. And I just feel like I feel like he's going to win. Polling is hard to decipher. And we've said before on the podcast that we share a friend who is a big pollster who shares polls with us, and he's fairly convinced of one outcome, but polling can be wrong. But I think
polling not only can be wrong, it has been wrong in each of the last 3 or 4 American elections.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is everyone focuses on the 2 times in 2016 and 2020 when it was wrong in favor of Donald Trump, or it underestimated him by 2 or 3 points. And people are correctly making the point that if that happens again, which it very well may, then Donald Trump will sweep the swing states and win maybe 315, 320 electoral votes and win very comfortably.
Yeah. I mean,
but those same people seem to have amnesia, Sarah, about the fact that 2 years ago there was a midterm election in which all the polls going into that election showed the Republicans comfortably taking the House of Representatives and the US Senate. And the Democrats in key races in swing states in that election overperformed the opinion polling by about 4%.
I think that there's a Donald Trump thing, though. I really do. I mean, there's a series of videos on TikTok that myself and my sister have started watching. And you know the way the algorithm works, like it'll keep feeding them. And there's a few different people in America, and they go around all kinds of states, all kinds of events, and they have a mic and they just go up to random people and they say, Trump or Kamala, Trump or Kamala, Trump or Kamala, right? And it's quite fascinating because you obviously know a lot about politics. I know a bit about politics, and you definitely make kind of like assessments of people as they're walking towards the mic, where you think the big Harris loving head on this one, like some, like I'm not going to describe it particularly, but it'll be like a woman who's like, a certain age, dressed a certain way, and like there's time and time again when you watch it, I've been like, this one is definitely Kamala, and some of them are, but some of them aren't, and you're kind of a bit taken aback. And then there's a huge amount of people that when he goes up to them, they're just like, oh, I'm not saying. And I think, why are you not saying? And I think that I'm not saying people will break more for Trump than will for her.
I think you're wrong.
Okay, go on.
I'll tell you why. I have never met a Donald Trump supporter who didn't tell me within the first 5 minutes of the conversation that he was a Donald Trump supporter. I look at what's happening online and I watch those same videos and I see the people who are Donald Trump supporters. They are the ones who are going, who are you voting for? Trump. I'm for Trump. And it's everywhere. And this idea that there's a shy Trump vote out there, I don't think tallies. I think Trump voters are desperate to tell you that they're Trump voters because it's this, isn't it? Sorry, I'm not doing this to the audience. I'm just demonstrating that that's what it is. It's the I am voting for this guy, so screw you. On the other hand, I think the shy Harris voter might be real. I think particularly in circles where Trump support is very loud and very proud. I think there are, and I'm not making this up. I read websites like The Dispatch, for example. I read the comment section. The Dispatch is sort of a website for disaffected conservatives. And I read the comments there, and the number of comments you see from people saying things like, I'm going to quietly go and vote Harris, my entire family are for Trump, blah, blah, blah. I think that effect could be real. And the other reason I think it's real is because Donald Trump is still in the opinion polls underperforming with Republicans. When the pollsters just poll everybody and they weight it, so they have Donald Trump winning 95% of Republicans, Kamala Harris winning 95% of Democrats, and they weight all the polls and it's about even. But then when you see a poll where they only poll Republicans, you see Donald Trump is actually underperforming a bit. He's only at about 88, 91% with Republicans. And I think there are about 5 or 6% of the electorate who are Republican voters, who are people who voted for George W. Bush and John McCain, and were really eager to vote for people like Mitt Romney, who, as we all know, are haters and losers and, couldn't win and didn't serve the country, got captured in Vietnam. And in Arizona in 2020, those voters shafted Donald Trump. They shafted him in a big way. They shafted Kari Lake, his Senate candidate, who was then running for governor and is now running for US Senate. Who said she didn't want the votes of McCain Republicans, and McCain Republicans said, well, that's okay, we'll vote for Democrats. I think Donald Trump might have a problem with his own base, and if he underperforms the polls, that will be the reason why. That's the note of caution I'll sound if you're a Trump supporter.
No, I mean, I definitely think there's an element of truth to that. I think that, that kind of McCain Republican, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and I was saying, like, take what you want to happen, take what you think out of it. I was a big fan of McCain. I thought he was, just like everything a politician should be. He was gracious, he was humble, he was smart. he had a good story. He was an amazing speaker. He was a really good politician. And I think that we're all, I think that the caliber of candidates in Kamala and in Donald Trump in many ways is just really poor compared to what's
very poor
gone in the past. And I think that that's the real, says something about the Democrats and the Republicans that, and by the way, I just have to say, because I was saying it to you, that, we hear a lot in Ireland about that only one-sided, all the problems with Donald Trump or whatever. But the Democrats are like Joe Biden calling Donald Trump supporters garbage is outrageous. And Hillary did this as well with her basket of deplorables. Like, who do these people think they are? They're voters. And it's and I'm really pleased and happy and thought it was really funny and clever that Donald Trump campaigned then in a garbage truck, because these people should be humiliated for their bullshit, entitled arrogance. Voters, it's the same in Ireland. You're the president of all of the people, not just the people you like, not just the people who voted for you. And, politics should be about sitting down with other people and finding a common ground, not calling people names. And we never hear a critique and an assessment of that, of Democrats in Ireland. Why are you smiling at me like that?
I'm smiling because while I agree with you in principle, I find it very funny that we're going to criticize the President of the United States for calling people he doesn't like names, while the candidate to replace him is Donald Trump.
And
I think,
but I'm saying,
I think on this, and I'm not having a go at you because I can see them in the comments. I did this last week, but I'm smiling because on this side, our side are fucking hypocrites. Absolute hypocrites there. Like, you can't stand there and go, Joe Biden called Donald Trump supporters garbage. That's terrible. He shouldn't do that. That's awful. How dare he look down on us while you're running a candidate for president who you're lining up behind, who calling poor immigrants coming across the borders human trash and human scum. You can't do it. I mean, either
that's
the standard...
not what I'm doing. I'm saying that the Democrats position themselves as being better than that, and they're not.
Oh, so how do we position ourselves? And I say we because you and I are both on that side of politics, right? We're both on that side of politics. We are both on the conservative. Joe Biden is a clown. His foreign policy is terrible. His economic policy is awful. Kamala Harris will be no better. I agree with every word of that, lest I be accused. But this kind of chip, and I'm not having to go at you specifically. I really am not, because I think the world of you. Everyone knows that. But this argument, which is that kind of like it's performative nonsense. We're annoyed because Joe Biden said a mean word about Trump supporters. I mean, listen to the average 5-minute Donald Trump speech. Are we really going to get on our high horse about that? Or is it actually, no, we don't hold Donald Trump to the same standard because he's on our side, and besides, Joe Biden supporters are trash. And that is the attitude. And I'm sorry, I'm not on board with it. And he might well win, and that's fine.
But Donald Trump is talked about as and held to account for calling people in his language and as of this and that day in and day out. My point is, and as he should be, but my point is that Democrats aren't, that Joe Biden isn't. My point is that the media, particularly what I'm talking about is the media in Ireland, will spend 2 days talking about the latest stupid, horrible thing that Donald Trump said, but won't give any airtime to the other. And the problem is that it's the entire standard of politics in America has plummeted to name calling, but they act as if it's an entirely one-sided thing, and I disagree.
No, it's not. Of course, it's not a one-sided thing. And of course, you had, when Donald Trump was president, you had those goons who called themselves the resistance. And you have, Fintan O'Toole wrote an article this week, which, just spare me this. Like, if Donald Trump wins, America is going to be a fascist state. Fintan, you're a smart man. Read the United States Constitution. You and I dislike Donald Trump for different reasons, Fintan. You dislike him because you think he's so brilliant he can just override the entirety of the United States Constitution and create a fascist state. I hate him because I don't think he could find page 3 of the US Constitution. So, but there is nonsense and hysteria on both sides. I absolutely concede that point. That's true.
But also, what I find fascinating is they're just completely ignoring the fact that Donald Trump was president before. And when Donald Trump was running for president before, all we heard was all this scaremongering about he'd do this and he'd do that. He did none of it. He can't have the nuclear codes. He's going to start a war. No, didn't happen. And now there's all this scaremongering again. He's going to do this and he's going to do that or whatever. Why didn't he do it before?
I mean, it's a fair question. Anyway, look, we've done it again. We've had an argument about the merits of the candidates, and really, I was hoping on the podcast, and that's good. It's good to have an argument, and people can call me a deranged never Trumper again in the comments, and that's fine. But we were actually going to talk about the outcome. So I'll give you my opinion. I don't have a clue. I don't know. I think you're right. All the fundamentals favor Donald Trump. Every fundamental: the economy, people's attitudes to the economy, inflation. Foreign policy environment favors Donald Trump. I mean, if he can't make a case that the US is Joe Biden's foreign policy has led to 2 significant wars, what's he at? I think he has made that case relatively successfully, and I also think he has been very cynical but very good in actually advocating retail politics. Kamala Harris's campaign has been awful for that. There's been no real, if you vote for me, I will give you this. Whereas Donald Trump is out there telling firefighters he won't levy taxes on them and he'll get rid of taxes on tips and he won't tax Social Security and he'll get rid of income taxes altogether and replace them with a tariff tax and what are the other things? I mean, all of it lies because, I mean, if you did half of those things, if you did 3 or 4 of those things, you'd bankrupt the US economy, let alone what he's suggesting. But they're retail offers to low information voters that say, if you vote for me, I will improve your life in this way. He's done those things to his political credit, and she hasn't. So I think everything favors him, but I really don't know. I can't call it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the same. I just, ultimately, we don't live in America. We don't pay taxes in America, and we're not voters in America, obviously. And I think sometimes, like when you look at polling and when you look at the kind of videos I'm talking about, if you don't understand something, it's because there's an element of it. Something seems completely insane. There's an element of it you don't understand. So if you're watching a Donald Trump rally and people are so passionate about him, there's something in there. And this is why I'm interested and love politics, is because I love people ultimately and their stories, and everybody has a story. And I refuse to accept that millions and millions and millions and millions of people in America are stupid or bad people or whatever. And so there's something in that. There's something there that those people are getting from Donald Trump that you or I might not understand, but we don't live there. And so I think that if I'm looking at it, I think Trump is going to win. If I was betting, that's what I would bet. And I think that it's very close, so I could be completely wrong, but there's something about all of the key issues. The electoral college is where it's at, obviously. And when you look at the electoral college, I just think Trump is gonna get it over the line.
Yeah, I would say one thing of what you said there, not related to the result at all, but just about it being in the US and the interest in it. And you get this sort of thing sometimes. I saw 1 or 2 comments last week along the lines of, why are you talking about the US election? I mean, it's Ireland.
Yeah.
The US election is vitally important to Ireland. And often when we talk about it being vitally important to Ireland, we talk about it being important in terms of the economy. And like I see, economists writing perfectly reasonably that, if Donald Trump wins, there could be pressure on the Irish system if he starts to try and repatriate US corporations to the US with tax incentives or that kind of stuff. So it has consequences in that way. But I think, Sarah, more importantly, it has enormous cultural consequences. Yeah. So like, I think that, ironically, culturally, I think the losing side will be emboldened. I think that both of these candidates are so weak that they are likely to be ineffective presidents. I think, and let's go through both scenarios. I think a scenario where Vice President Harris wins the election on Tuesday, she's not going to win it by a big amount. There will be obviously those who say she didn't win it at all. There will be controversy. There will be protests. They'll say she doesn't have a mandate. She'll likely go into office with her hostile Republican Senate, maybe a hostile Republican House of Representatives. She will be able to get very little done in those first 2 years. Midterms will probably go against her. The Middle Eastern, all these things that can go wrong and are likely to go wrong with her as president. Is she able to deal with them? I don't think so. Donald Trump, let's say he wins. He's immediately a lame duck because he can't run for re-election. So he's essentially got 2 years before the primaries start and people start running to replace him and sideline him. He's going to have at least a filibuster strong majority in the Senate of Democrats who will refuse to work with him under any circumstances to get anything done. It's going to be the usual kind of Donald Trump, he's going to be preoccupied as well, by the way, with his own enemies list, stopping the court cases against him, all this sort of stuff. Is he going to accomplish anything really meaningful? You may believe that. You may believe that he is, and I respect you if you believe that, and I hope he proves me wrong, but I don't think he is. And what's going to happen is that the other side supporters are going to be energized. So I think that in the US, a Harris win probably strengthens the political right in the medium term. And just as it did the last time, I think a Trump win probably energizes and radicalizes the left even more. Because the left got immensely more radical after 2016. And that's something that nobody talks about. It got really more radical as a reaction to the Donald Trump presidency. And I'm not sure that was a great trade for the right. I'm really not sure it was, given where we are today. But yeah, so I think culturally this is massively important because whatever happens will obviously bleed over into here, as Fintan O'Toole's warbling but a fascist state would make clear. I think.
Well, we're going to know soon. And like I said last week, I'm tremendously bored of it at this point. And it feels like this election has been going on for 2 years. And so whatever.
It has.
Well, yeah, it has.
Donald Trump announced his candidacy for this election in November of 2022.
Was it?
Or was it December? But he has been running for almost 2 solid years. Ugh. That's how long this has been going on.
Right. Well, then it is 2 years. It feels like 10 then, I'll say. But I'd like it to be over.
Yeah, we all would. All right. Well, what else happened this week while I was away?
What else happened this week? You have the list, John.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't have. Normally, you might see when I'm doing the podcast, me looking down.
No, I'm teasing.
For the next thing we talk about.
Sinn Féin came out with their policy on, their policy on transgenderism in children, and how they just want children to be happy was basically the gist of it. A lot of mealy mouth stuff. So for anybody who's thinking about voting for Sinn Féin, and from Poland, there's probably about 6 of you. There's they're not going to do you any favors on protecting your wives who are incarcerated from men, put it that way. And they're not going to do anything for kids either.
It's the usual Sinn Féin. It's the usual Sinn Féin policy, which is Sinn Féin's policy on almost every hot button issue, which is to write the policy in such a way that it's vague enough so that the canvasser on the door could say to the voter, well, our policy agrees with you.
Yeah.
And then he goes to the voter next door with the exact opposite opinion on all of this, and he goes, well, now our policy agrees with you. Sinn Féin do this on everything. Yeah. If you read their policy, the one thing, in fairness, their housing policy, I'll give them credit, was quite detailed. Not necessarily good, but detailed. Yeah. But that's really the only area where they've come out with a detailed policy where the canvasser can't do the...
Yeah, in fairness, their housing spokesperson, he does his Uberwalia. There's no doubt about that. He does the work. But what I found interesting as well...
When you say Uberwalia, a shiver goes down my spine. Shiver goes down my spine. And it's just the way, and I'm not accusing, it's just the way, there's always a teacher in school who would pepper her language with occasional Irish phrases, but they'd always be terrible ones, like Uberwalia. Anyway, he does. You're right. Owen O'Brien does his homework.
He does.
Need to apologise. I'm just.
What I think is kind of interesting, and just as I was struck by the fact that, and I'm not suggesting that I have any kind of ideas as to how they could be doing this, but obviously you continue to launch policy platforms, whatever. There's a general election coming up, but I just was struck by, and theoretically I'm here for any policy on that issue because it's one that's very close to my heart, but a party that's in free fall as they are, and chaos, and just doing terribly all around in every poll, and has gone from the dauphin of Irish government to the possibly not even the main opposition party next time, is kind of wandering around like they've got not a care in the world. And I'm surprised that they're not hunkered down in a bunker somewhere trying to figure out how to get themselves out of this mess, and not doing I don't know, just It all seems
Yeah.
it all seems very calm from the outside, but surely to God in private they're all freaking out. No.
Yeah, I mean, what did you make, Sarah, of the opinion poll at the weekend? Because there was an opinion poll at the weekend. It was the Red Sea opinion poll, which is a very highly regarded poll,
Yeah.
which showed, I think, Fianna Fáil up 3, Fine Gael down 1, Sinn Féin down another one. So it ended up being something like, I'm away, so I didn't look at the figures in detail, but it ended up being something like Fine Gael 22, Fianna Fáil 21, Sinn Féin 16. I mean, we're talking in detail here every week about Sinn Féin's troubles, as we should be, because they're remarkable. 2 years ago, they were 30 something percent and on course to walk the election. Now their support has halved effectively. But why are we acting? I saw that poll and I was thinking to myself, why are we acting in some level like Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are political geniuses here? I mean, their numbers are basically anemic, and broadly speaking, if Red Sea is right, where they were 4 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think polls are polls, and if you're knocking around politics a long time, and like obviously you get it wrong and you get it right and you make your predictions, but you also develop over time kind of litmus test things that you do yourself, that you start to get a feel for things. And that poll to me is completely at odds with what I'm feeling from people that I talk to. Different, like I would kind of have let's say a kind of a group of female friends who are all around 40, who all have kids, who are all working, that kind of WhatsApp group. And then I'd have, different types of friends who, like maybe a group of men who are a bit younger, like I used to do it when I was in college. I worked with a taxi company, so I have a lot of taxi drivers who are friends who I'd kind of chat to about politics kind of a bit on the phone or on text. So there's a few kind of litmus tests that I use. And my sense is that there is a momentum behind Fine Gael at the moment. I know that's not showing up in that poll, but I think that stabilitarians, I would coin them, people who are relatively happy with the way things are at the moment, are paying their mortgage, bit peeved about the cost of living, but they're not requiring hospitals or seeing that the shit show that a hospital is. They're not on a housing list. They're not waiting for like whatever. They're not renting or on the market or any of that stuff. So they're not directly personally affected by some of the hot issues of this election, and so they're kind of leaning towards Fine Gael. And then I have other groups of friends, literally somebody yesterday messaging me, who are I would say probably originally Fianna Fáil voters, working class, would have been probably ventured into Sinn Féin territory, very upset about immigration, that kind of thing. And they're completely abandoning Sinn Féin now and looking at independence and stuff like that. So I think that poll is one poll, but for me, I think that the bad day on the election day is going to be for Sinn Féin. I think Fianna Fáil are just going to hold by and large, and I think Fine Gael are going to get gains. And furthermore, I can tell you the constituencies where I think Fine Gael are going to make gains. So you can see it emerging now. Constituencies where Fine Gael are going to win seats or 2 seats. Dunleary, I think Fine Gael are potentially going to take Holly Kearns' seat in that constituency. So there's clawback. You can see if Fine Gael wins. I know you made a prediction about Clare. Maybe 2 Fianna Fáils there, but by and large, I see a couple of Fianna Fáil losses, maybe a couple of gains, kind of holding the line. But I think the momentum in this election will be behind Fine Gael. I think they've been stronger on their messaging. I think they're more coherent in their messaging. I think there's a clear team of people. It's definitely Simon Harris, but there's a kind of there's an obvious front bench team. I think the Mihal show has run out of steam effectively, and the sort of the momentum or the coherence of that campaign for Fianna Fáil is going to be hard to achieve. And I think Sinn Féin are in free fall. So I take your point that Red Sea is a good poll, and Fianna Fáil may very well be up 3, but I think Fine Gael are doing better than you think.
Well, if you're a listener and you're listening to Sarah and you're going, no, she's wrong. I would just remind you that earlier this year we had 2 referendums. There were opinion polls, including the Red Sea poll, showing a comfortable yes victory. And Sarah and I were on this podcast, and Sarah was saying, I'm talking to my wide circle of friends, and I think this thing is going down. And she was right.
By the way,
so when Sarah says things
way more important than that, in the local and European elections, I was the only one who literally nearly got it to the number what Sinn Féin were going to get. Do you remember? I said
Correct.
13, and that's, what did they get, 12?
Yes, you did. So when Sarah's saying this sort of stuff, you should listen to her. Now, I have to say, I'm not taking my own advice. I don't necessarily agree. I do think Fine Gael are likely to make some gains because of there are one or two constituencies where they basically did so badly the last time under Varadkar, where a snap back to sort of a median performance should get them some gains. But I do think that particularly in bigger constituencies like 4 and 5 seat constituencies, I think the last seat might well be a lottery, and I think a lot of those lotteries might go to kind of wacky independents.
Oh, for sure.
And I say wacky, when I say wacky independents, I don't mean like crazy people. I mean just people who aren't expected to get elected. Because I think there's still a big discontented protest vote out there. I think it's quietened down, but I think part of the quietening down has been the media deliberately trying to tamp it down. I think the media are doing their solemn duty to kind of like calm the nation before the election in case people have any crazy ideas about the hated far right or anything like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
but there's also
no
a lot of
coherent...
those. But a lot of those constituencies as well will be personality driven. Like I think that the complaint has always been, I'm annoyed at Fine Gael or I'm annoyed at Fianna Fáil or Sinn Féin, and I'm upset about the following issues. But who do I vote for? I've nobody to vote for. So I think you have to take it constituency by constituency. In certain constituencies, there's a really, really strong independent leash. Do you know what I mean? Elaine Mullally, people like that, like really, really like person who has a business in that constituency, who's worked there, raised their family there, a really strong candidate. If you've got somebody like that, it's a no-brainer. But other constituencies don't have that quality of candidate. So it depends on where you live.
Tipperary North. Now, somebody may emerge in my home constituency of Tipperary North, but at the moment I was looking through on Adrian Kavanagh, the NUI Maynooth professor, lovely guy, the real, like I say this as a compliment, the nerdiest of politics nerds, has a website where he lists all the candidates in every constituency as they're declared. And I was going through Tipperary North the other day, and no disrespect to Alan Kelly or Jackie Cahill or any of the rest of them who are running, Michael Lowry. I'm not really sure where that number one is going yet. Really not. So there's no one there. There's no one there who jumps out at me, shall we say? And I think there are a lot of voters in the same boat as me. Maybe not for the same reasons as me, but in the same boat. We're all here in the who do we vote for camp. So we'll see.
Do you think that do you think that what happens in the States will affect our election in any way in terms of like culture or wars or just the mood?
I think if Trump wins, it'll help the soft left parties. I think the likes of because as I said, the result will provoke a reaction either way. So I think that if Donald Trump wins the election and the world is going to shit, if you're a sort of a middle-class suburban lawyer living somewhere like Ranelagh or Rathmines, and you are somebody who always voted Vanna Bacik or Jim O'Callaghan because they're good Law Society types, I think you'll run to vote for Vanna Bacik to register your protest against the awfulness and fascism that's overtaken the US. And I think that middle-class soft left vote will strengthen in Ireland as a result of a Donald Trump victory. I think a Kamala Harris victory, on the other hand, may induce a little bit of complacency. But I don't know. I think that'll be at the margins if it's there at all. That's my sense. Do you think that sounds crazy?
No. Yeah, I think it definitely affects. We'll see. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of baffled at the idea that somebody would run to vote for Vanna Bacik. That's kind of thrown me.
She keeps winning elections.
She won one election.
Of kind of normal people.
No.
But I was going to say not elections of normal people. Like she's a very good vote getter amongst Trinity alumni, who are the kind of people I'm thinking of. Many of whom live in Ranelagh, work in the law library, and will be choosing between her if they're thinking with their hearts, and somebody like Jim O'Callaghan if they were thinking with their wallet books or their pocketbooks, as the Americans say. They would run to vote for her. Anyway, our hour is pretty much up. We will probably be seeing you twice a week for the next few weeks. With the American election next week and then the Irish general election thereafter. So there'll be lots to talk about. You can be sick of us by the end of it. And look, no more. I won't be a Trump deranged person after next Tuesday anyway. So I mean that'll be a relief to some listeners. But look, I got to call these things as I see them, as does Sarah. And to do anything else would be to lie to you, even if you are a Trump supporter or indeed anything else. So Sarah, thank you very much for joining me as ever. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you at some stage next week, probably before Friday, for another edition of The Week That Really Was. Take care.